welcome back Tyler Taormina, the director and writer of the film.
Hey,
I'll start. Tyler, I understand that the idea of the film came from watching some home movie, like a wedding home movie from your parents. Can you take us into that?
yes. So the funny thing about home movies is I actually really don't have the heart to watch them. It's just too hard. I don't know. There's something about seeing my family and myself at earlier points. I can't do it. I think that's why I wanted to make this. But it really started with my parents' wedding tape, which we watched on their 30th anniversary. And it was their first time watching it in 30 years. And to me, it was a summer night, and we watched it outside, and it was really one of the most powerful cinematic experiences I've had. I felt I was just in post-production for my first feature, and I felt such a strong, I felt so strongly close to my vocation. I felt like this is really where I belong in the world. The way that this home footage, or rather this wedding footage, it captures a very clumsy celebration of life, and it's mundane, but it's also epic. And I think that the way that my writing partner Eric Berger and I, we both grew up in Smithtown, we approached this film like a home movie, but using to honor sort of the mundanity which is inherent to home videos. We wanted to pair that with a sort of grandiose cinematic expression, using the vocabulary of the camera of Max Ophuls and so many great cineasts who have a luxurious way of expressing reality with the camera and with lighting and these things.
The film has a loose narrative structure, and part of its beauty is how it flawlessly moves in between this vignette. How did you write it? How did you and your co-writer work on it?
So this film is sort of it's a step on a journey I've been on. This is my third feature, and for some reason I intuited early on in making films that I was interested in films that were more about atmosphere than they were about story. And in my first short film I had made, I had written about the form that interested me, and I called it the ecosystem film. Films that were made with a sort of collective protagonist, where the point of the movie is to gain an understanding about a milieu of people through sort of exploring anyone and anyone, and comparing them all, and especially how they relate to rituals. So these things have just very much interested me in my journey. And the way we wrote this film, structurally speaking, was actually on a diner mat. We drew the house, and we drew the fire trucks, we drew the strip mall, we drew the lake, and spatially, actually, it's how I was able to see how the whole narrative would feel, which this movie is mainly about the act of leaving one's home, the sort of transgression in which running away from home is.
And how there are so many characters, and how did you map the characters? Because I think that's also quite an...
Well, the first thing we did when we wrote this film was we basically took a psychological snapshot of the whole family tree, and we decided that there was a moment that happens about 40 years before this film takes place, where the patriarch dies, and this happens to be a traumatic moment for the family, and the way that the matriarch deals with that with her children is very intense, and the way they handle that intensity is different than the way they parent as a result. So we basically tracked trauma intergenerationally, and as a result, we were able to see how everyone might be relating to the pretext of getting together, forcing them to get together on the holiday. Granted, this is a family who loves each other, who want to make it work and be there. But somewhere in the back of their minds, I think, is at any point in time on the screen is this is weighing on their shoulders, which is funny because we didn't tell the actors any of this backstory, but it's there in the writing.
We were talking before. One of the things that impressed me the first time I saw the film is how flawlessly he moves from scene to scene and from space to space. And it turns out that it was 4 different houses that you shot. Can you talk a little bit about the settings and how you made it so flawless in between the various spaces?
Well, thank you so much. That's very, very kind of you to say that. Well, first, I just want to say that I always envisioned the first hour of this film to be like pinball, just, room to room, song to song, face to face, object to object, just a real, almost manic taking in of life, a ravenous taking in of life. But the way in which that we photographed the space and dealt with it with 4 different houses, my producer mentioned that maybe we'll have the camera roving in between the rooms, like going from room to room. And she was showing me my impulses were so on another way where I believe that's what cinema could do is take so many disparate things and the mind creates something in between all of that space, which is why you believe this house to be one place and why different still frames of different rooms somehow all feel like they're cramped together. What's funny about the houses actually is that we shot in 4 houses. 3 of them, I think it was 3 of them, had the situation where the matriarch had died and the kids were about to sell the house, and we shot in between that. So it was a very weird moments of this film mirroring the reality. And what's funny is that I feel like there's just the house is so filled with memories. Even the decor. If you look at the credits, there's
families, man.
So many names for people who donated set decorations, which probably are like mine in the film, like their favorite things, those objects that sing because they've lived so long. So there's just this movie between these houses that have been through so much history and these objects. It's a real ode to memory and a maximalistic one at that.
And how similar or different it is from the way you experienced Christmas when you were a teenager, for example?
So I do come from a big family, and this season, the celebration began late and ended very late. However, this is co-written by my writing partner who's Jewish and and he didn't celebrate Christmas at all or like this, but it's partly my family, it's partly his, and as a result, it's kind of this artificial in-between where it's neither of our lives. It's this in-between space. And also, the movie is kind of an in-between space as well, because, if I were to go back and experience these early Christmases where this is inspired by, it wouldn't be like this, actually. This is what the mind does. You have these memories from so long ago, and they just kind of like a sponge in the water. They just grow. There's this quality that life becomes more almost magical when it's in this vague spot in memory, and that's what this film is. It's that spot. It's not literal.
Raise your hand if you have questions. And there's right there.
I kind of noticed that you said the movie is about running away, being able to run away, to leave the family. And yet I was thinking that actually what I was watching was the disintegration of the family with the imminent demise of the Nona, the grandmother, or her actually being taken out of her home and put away. So she was losing her power, losing her domicile, and the source of her power and strength. And so is she running away too, or is the family running her away, running her out? I'm trying to figure out, because it's kind of a teenage thing with the teenagers running away from home, but yet their parents did not. That older generation was all right there.
Well, thank you for such a thoughtful question. I think what's so important about this film is that there is running away and there's expiry. The house is being sold. This is their last time. So it really loads the gun in a sense that this teenager, Emily, has no idea that she's actually taking for granted something that's going to end. You know, she is leaving so thoughtlessly and carelessly something that is finite. You know, and this is what I said in my introduction, is about taking things for granted. What I think is interesting about it is that there's sort of an inevitability of families having their endings, just in the sense that the family grows and these other families start growing off it, and then after a while the house can't fit everyone. So these waves of these traditions in families, they have their own lifespan to them. And the two things you mentioned are actually kind of related in a sense, because I consider, and this is something that's been on my mind recently thinking about the film, so I'm just sort of running you through just thoughts I have, not necessarily declarations. But what makes this film a coming-of-age film is that you see this teenager coming into her own self. For the first time in her life, she's able to do something that she couldn't do before, and that's sex. That's the one thing you can't do with your family, actually. And all these kids, they're drawn outside the home to explore something new. And that's the same actual human drive that creates all these other families that cause a splintering off of the original. So that's probably a verbose, a meandering reply, but I think the point is life is going to end soon, and we still choose to take it for granted by leaving during the most beautiful part, which is in this film when the home videos are being played. It just happens. Yeah.
It's not even taking it for granted. I mean, it's not even taken for granted. I mean, we could talk about the morality of the guy, the uncle, not saying that he has sold the home and told anybody. But number two, it's not just the teenager is taking it for granted. She's actually, the end of the movie, she's actually coming back home lugging a sack of garbage bagels. So it's even a little bit more fraught than that, where she's sort of unknowingly returning.
Absolutely.
There was another one right there.
Thank you, wherever you are. Hi. This was such a wonderful film to watch, and I'm curious about. I mean, every detail and action is so specific and clear, and I wonder about the various ways you thought about closing, because there's a wonderful ambiguity in the ending, and I wonder about what other choices you considered.
Well, thank you. I think that the way that filmmakers and screenwriters decide to end their films is super important, because it's when we get to manipulate the audience. And a lot of times the films that are rewarded and celebrated are the ones with the most viscerally manipulative endings. That's something that doesn't sit well with me. And in fact, there's a filmmaker named Haile Gerima who talks about how these films that end in this resolve, they make you go home and believe that the world is okay, and that's not okay. There was a few different endings I had in mind that would have been a cop-out. One of them would be that she comes home and looks through the window and sees her grandmother and mother in that sort of image we left off on them, which I think would have been nice. Aw, and then you go home. The other one, was kind of a total ripoff of the ending of The Swimmer, where she comes home and the house is gutted and it's sold. The future's here, which would have been really fun, and maybe wouldn't have been too bad. But this is, to me, the high road for my artistic integrity. My writing partner, Eric Berger, totally agrees. When we came up with this ending, I think I slept for like 13 hours. I was so overwhelmed. It's just really important to me.
I noticed that you were also credited as the transportation director, which seems an unusual credit for someone who directed and wrote the movie. Maybe you can talk about how that influenced your process.
You know, it's funny. There's the picture at the end. It's myself, my AD, and my producer in my parents' bed, at like 6 p.m. The sun is setting, and I'm in my pajamas. I have my sleep mask on. I'm working 2 weeks before this production began. When you make an independent film, so much is required of you. Like I actually had to plan out every actor's ride to and from the city with our fleet of Teamsters, aka like recently graduated high school students. But I think, though, what's interesting to say is that at one point this film was going to be a Hollywood industry film. We were in the process of packaging it with ICM, which are an agency that was bought out by another agency called CAA. These are the industries, the agencies that have all the actors and the money connections. And we were gearing to make the film with Universal International. We were going to make it for about $3 million. And after like a year or so of just almost making it, I realized like, whoa, this is never going to happen. And I just said, forget all you. And I fired them all. And I found some like crypto billionaire guy. And he was very enthusiastic to just make it the way in which we can sort of do it ourselves in our backyard with our family. And that's what led to me being the transportation captain.
First of all, I want to say you've made a beautiful film. Susan, hold on for the mic.
Sorry.
You've made a beautiful film. It's beautifully cast. It's beautifully directed. And the use of music is extraordinary. How did you pull that off on that budget?
I should be in prison. No. Wow. So we began writing this script to Scorpio Rising. This was, Kenneth Anger was there at the beginning with us for this film. Coincidentally, he was also there at the beginning of Ham on Rye, my first film, where we listened to the song in his film Custom Car Commandos, which was originally the centerpiece song of that film. I was so attached to this movie, and I was not going to let anyone tell me I couldn't use it. I guarantee you if I made it with Hollywood, the soundtrack would be like stupid Christmas songs or something like that. The way in which we did it was we had our production budget, and we ended up having to raise a lot more money after to support the music. A degree that if it was all to be like budgeted together, people would be like, you can't allot that much to music. But to me, this is so ingrained in the DNA and everything of this film that it's what's going to make it live on. And that's what's most important to myself and my whole team. We're all there to see this film come to life.
There is a freedom to the film. Speaking of Hollywood, Christmas films is a genre. Christmas comedy, they're all family. This is a very unusual. It veers off. I mean, it hits some of the things of the genre, but then it's completely different. And I wanna ask you what you take the liberty of having these long vignettes that completely depart from the main narrative. Who cares if what's cooking is burning or not? They have to go down in the basement and do this other thing. At some point they go out of the house. The whole thing with the teenagers in the snow in the cars. I mean, that's so beautiful. You take your time. I'm wondering, what were you looking at and what were you not looking at in terms of the genre and outside of it?
Well, what's funny is I really didn't consider the genre until having to talk about the film so much, where I started to realize, like, this actually is a pretty genred Christmas film in the sense that this genre is basically born of Charles Dickens. And what he teaches us for Christmas films is that they are existential. They are a way that it invites us to look at our lives and say, oh, wow, I shouldn't take this for granted. I'm here right now. Another big part of Christmas films is coming home, being with the family, and having to sort of reconcile the familial relationship. So a lot of the heart of what Christmas films are is in this film, but it didn't really begin as a Christmas film of, I didn't watch any other Christmas films to prepare. I didn't care. I didn't think about that. In fact, what we watched was American Graffiti, and that's what we watched several times writing the film. But one thing I think is interesting is the way we were my writing partner and I were led into Christmas as our decision for this narrative ensemble exploration, and it's actually through the ornaments. We realized that we decorate these homes every year, and it's kind of an unnecessary act, but it's amazing, and it's this excess that to me is the proof that we we are declaring in some way that like this life is worth living. It's worth celebrating. That's why we're doing all this extra stuff for no reason, just to enjoy it. And the way that which we really got deep into this film is paralleling these ornaments and these excesses to these memories we have. All these memories in our heads, what to do with all of them? What's the point of all of them? To enjoy, you know. So that's actually really what the heart of this film is as a Christmas film to me.
And the casting. You have a fantastic combination of different actors, and I presume different non-actors. Can you take us a little bit through that and how you work with them? I mean, just the children are incredibly effective.
Oh, thanks. So we looked at probably about 100,000 headshots on backstage.com, and we've set a radius. I didn't just did a casting call and said who's gonna want to be in this movie. I've done so many of those in my life. I know how it works out. So what I did was I set a radius for like 20, 30 miles from my hometown, from New York City, and I looked at all these headshots. And if there were remotely interesting pictures of these people, I would want to know more about them. And really casting such a wide net allowed me to find these people who really made me feel so much. You know, they come in the room and they're just buzzing with vulnerability, with purity, with themselves. And that's so important for this film because it's all about honoring them. So I didn't really have to even direct them so much. I mean, if a note was off, if a pace was off, yes, of course. But at the end of the day, I put myself in the position to cast people who I am in love with, and I want to just see them.
Question? There is something. There is one last thing I want to ask you to contextualize better Tyler's work. Tyler is part of a film collective. You work, you make your films, but you also work with a group of people. Alexandra, who's here, she has a film that we hope will be showing in the spring. So can you talk a little bit about Omnis and how does it function?
So yes, I'm part of a Omnis Film Collective. We've done 7 feature films, and our first few films were made out of pocket budgets, really tiny films that basically filmmakers at the beginning of their path have 2 options. Either they wait forever to get that golden ticket to make a big Hollywood film, and some of them may become Ari Aster, but to be honest with you, the majority of them never, ever will make a movie. They'll just wait forever. The other camp is like the Werner Herzog camp, where we're going to make this movie no matter what. And the way in which we were able to do this is with the help from each other. So we basically, our collective is about 12 of us, and we spread the labor for our films so that we can make them affordably. And a big part of it actually is, this is obviously this strange movie to a point, and it's maybe the least strange of our films. So a big thing that we do is we really embolden one another simply by having a true interest and admiration for one another's ideas. So in a typical studio or Hollywood or whatever Hollywood is now, like these mini studios, in this typical way, you'd have to convince these people who don't even really like movies, or maybe do, about an idea you can't even put to words. But amongst a group of best friends, that appreciation and that understanding is so instantaneous that it's emboldened us to really take risks. And our films, I consider my body of work to be all of our films, actually, because I think we're all participating in our own individual ways in a conversation with one another that is really exciting. And in fact, we had a really exciting opportunity that both Alexandra, who's here, and I were not able to participate in. They showed all of our films at a resort island in China this month, which was pretty wild.
But you said that Christmas Eve, it's been particularly popular in China, right?
Yeah, so I was able to go a few months ago.
Speaking
for a
about
film
Universal,
festival. And what everyone says in China is, oh my God, it's my family on Chinese New Year. And I was like, oh my, it is. Wow. That's so cool. Really.
Okay, I think you have the other. No, okay. So, well, thank you so much. Thank you, Tyler.
Thank you all. Really appreciate it. Really kind audience. Thank you.